Blow Up is the 1966 film from Michelangelo Antonioni. The film follows one day in the life of Thomas, David Hemmings, a London fashion photographer in the 60s. While taking photos in the park, he witnesses a couple and takes a few photos of them. The woman begs him to give her the photos, but he refuses. She later tries to steal the photos, and even goes so far as to offer herself in return for them. When he looks closer at the images, blowing them up to bigger and bigger sizes, he believes that he's interrupted a plot. My analysis of the film is that it deals with the transition from modernism to postmodernism. Modernism is generally defined by its interpretive style, moving away from the poetic realism style popular in the 1930s.
Je ne l'aime pas, il est trop violet.
Italian neorealism from post-World War II, of which some of Antonioni's previous work belongs to, and the social realist films of the mid-1950s. It changed film from being the reproduction of reality to an art form, taking on the philosophy that anything could be art. Directors heavily used symbolism and aspects of surrealism to convey the deeper meanings in their films. These mostly linked back to psychoanalysis, which was becoming very popular at the time due to works of Freud and other philosophers. The directors began to use the camera to express the thoughts and emotions of their characters. The breaking of realism also caused the idea of fragmentation to become popular in modernist work, particularly in that of French New Wave, where there would not only be fragmentation in editing, but in sets and characters. In Blow Up, examples of fragmentation can be seen visually in the beginning photo shoot and in the centre montage of the film as Thomas's mind begins to disconnect from reality. Postmodernism began after the philosophy of anything could be art was questioned. If anything could be art, then there was no reason to conform to normality. Postmodernism is what most people imagine when they think of modern art. A prime example of this is Andy Warhol. Warhol's cheap, reproducible style showed how art didn't have to have true value or meaning. This was then influenced by The Death of the Author from the essay by Roland Barthes, where he states, "To give a text an author is to impose a limit on that text, to furnish it with a final signified, to close the writing." So a text, or in this case a film, can be interpreted in any possible way, regardless of the author's intention. The influence of art was also brought into question, that art could not change or better the world around it, and only give the impression of change. The film follows Thomas dealing with the prospect of art being pointless. Initially, he's shown spending rough nights to shoot for his own personal project, a book which he describes as pretty violent. Like other modernist work, he tries to shed light on an aspect of society he disagrees with. The artist is trying to make a work with a set interpretation. It is clear he believes there's a moral obligation that comes with art. Thomas also views art in a very sensual way, highlighted in the photo shoot with Verushka. The scene escalates and draws parallel between photography and sex.
Yes, now really good. Come on. Come on, work. Great, and again. Go on, back, arms up. Great. That's it, keep it up. Lovely. Yeah, make it come. Great. No, head up. Love for me. Now, go on, yes.
Before eventually finishing and slumping on the sofa. There are other sexual scenes with Vanessa Redgrave's character, two models, and a brief scene involving his neighbour, who he seems to hold a deep emotional connection with. He looks at her as if she alone could heal his soul, and may once have done so. The appreciation of art and the modernist interpretation of it can be seen throughout the film. Examples of this is when he tries to introduce Redgrave to music and his interest in the propeller, which Thomas calls a piece of sculpture.
What's it for?
Nothing. It's beautiful. Perhaps I'll put it there like a piece of sculpture.
It'll look good there, it'll break up the straight lines.
However, Thomas believes that art can be misused. His contempt of commercial work is clear in a later photo shoot with a group of models, wherein he grows aggressive with their ignorance.
Wake up!
The fact that this scene takes place directly after the shoot with Verushka only further makes the contrast between the joy of his personal work and his hatred of the commercial. The irony behind this is that he needs the commercial work in order to fulfill his personal projects.
Wish I had tons of money. Then I'd be free.
Free to do what? Free like him?
He not only needs the commercial projects for money, but to provide him with a purpose, as the rest of the film questions whether his work actually does have reason. The centrepiece of the film is the montage where he investigates the image shot at the park. As he slowly pieces together the story, the film is edited so that it follows his thoughts in a similar way to a stream of consciousness, panning from one image to the other as he looks at them in turn. The use of the camera as following Thomas's thoughts is used throughout the film. Examples of this before the montage are prevalent when he visits the artist next door. He doesn't focus on the art, as it has no interest for him. However, he does want to take the art away from the artist, similarly to how he wants to take away the girlfriend. This is shown by the excessive focus on her throughout this scene. The montage confirms that the murder is a figment of Thomas's imagination. As it originally cuts between the pictures, there is nothing noticeable. However, midway through the sequence, the gunman is suddenly added to the image. The clarity of the gunman and his weapon against the rest of the otherwise grainy footage only further shows how it's been planted there by his mind. The images bear comparison to the famous psychological Rorschach test, where the subject constructs images out of blotches. He wants there to be a level to his work that is changing the world around him, and so changes the images in his mind. Thomas thinks that he has saved the man's life. Ebert writes, "Whether there was a murder isn't the point. We recognise the bliss of an artist lost in what behaviourists call the process. He's not thinking about money, ambition, or his own nasty personal defects, but is instead lost in his craft. His mind, hands, and imagination work in rhythmic sync. He is happy." Shortly after that, 2 rejected girls from earlier arrive at his flat, eager to have their photos taken. His faith in photography restored once more, he fulfills his more sensual side of the art by sleeping with them both. After this, he realises something else. He shuns the girls as doubt begins to return again, and on further inspection it is shown that his final photograph has a limb protruding in the background. He has failed to save the man after all. This mirrors an earlier scene where his artist friend is explaining his abstract work.
They don't mean anything when I do them. Just a mess. Afterwards, I find something to hang on to. Like that. Like that leg. It's like finding a clue in a detective story.
Thomas is desperately trying to cling on to something in his photography. This is when Thomas's thoughts begin to affect what we see on screen. He visits the park again in the hopes of confirming his beliefs and does indeed find a body there. This is, however, part of his imagination. The body is a fashion mannequin, perfectly posed and straight, his artistic creation. Later he sees Redgrave's character outside a shop, only to have her disappear, and attempts following her into a concert. The concert goers in this scene are either perfectly still or slowly dancing, as if they are all posing models for some big fashion shoot. During the concert, he manages to grab the broken remnants of the band's guitar, despite the entire crowd fighting over it, only to discard it once he gets outside. While it may have seemed important at the time, it was really only a broken piece of guitar. This is the realization of postmodernism, that at the end of the day, art is just an object. It holds no reason except for that projected onto it. When he visits the park again in the morning, he finds that the body has vanished and comes across the mimes from the beginning again, playing a game of imaginary tennis. When Thomas reaches for the imaginary tennis ball, he acknowledges his imagination and accepts it. As he listens to the sounds of the mimed tennis, he realizes that this is something only he can hear, much like how he was the only person that could see the murder. The camera pulls back, showing the loneliness of Thomas as he has now accepted that he will be the only one that sees his work for how he intended it. As Thomas fades away, we are reminded that this is only a film. Antonioni reminds us that this is his vision, informing us that he is represented in Thomas as he too comes to terms with this new change in his life. The film comes full circle by following the students in the familiar grass shop from the beginning. Antonioni has learnt his lesson and accepted the idea of postmodernism, and so cannot return to where he once was. He must begin again.